Well, hi there, friends, and welcome to the last episode of the Acute Variables Definition Series. Today we're going to go over tempo, exercise selection, and duration. Let's get to it.
If you want to be amazing. Yeah, now that I know that I would, finding the paper for good, smoking up none but the good, now that I should, God be the girl, low be the bar, high be the bush, time to inhale.
Okay, so first things first, let's define tempo. Tempo refers to the speed at which you perform an exercise. And although that sounds very simple, before we can dive into which tempos are optimal for different training styles, we need to break down the parts of a repetition. You have three different parts. You have the eccentric, the isometric, and the concentric. And I'm going to use two different exercises to explain them to make just so it makes sense. So for a squat, the eccentric is the way down, the isometric is in the middle, and the concentric is the way up. For something like a lat pull down, the concentric is actually going to be the way down, isometric is the hold at the bottom, and then the eccentric is the way up, okay? So now that you know the parts of a repetition, let's talk about how tempo is expressed. So most of the time, if you have a coach that's ever given you like 3-second eccentrics or something, or if you've ever bought a program that might have a tempo specified, you'll see it as three numbers, like 3-0-0, or whatever the case may be. So basically what that is eccentric, isometric, concentric. And no matter which way the movement actually goes, that will be true. So you have to kind of pay attention and know those little parts to make sure that you're doing the tempo correctly. So let's break that down a little bit. Let's say you have a 2-1-3 tempo. Then the eccentric is going to be 2 seconds. So for a squat on the way down, 2 seconds, and then a 1 second pause at the bottom, and then 3 seconds to come back up. For the lat pull down, it would be 3 seconds on the way down, 1 second at the bottom, and then 2 seconds on the way up. So that's, it's written all the same no matter which way the movement goes. Okay, so now that you know the parts of the repetition and how tempo is expressed, let's talk about the different tempos that you can use for different goals. If you are a beginner and you're wanting to perfect your technique and movements, then I would definitely recommend using a tempo that allows you to control the movement as much as possible. So maybe like a 2-1-2 or a 3-1-3 or something where you're able to understand if you're having form breakdowns, where it's happening so that you can work on those. If you're more interested in explosiveness or powerlifting, then I would actually recommend quite the opposite. You would want to perform at least, if nothing else, the concentric as quickly as possible. So sometimes when that's the case, the concentric might be expressed as an X. There's not even a number there. It's just like, just push, just go, right? So there you go. That's tempo. Now we can move on to exercise selection. So this is a really important part of programming. Obviously, it doesn't matter how you manipulate any of the other variables. If you aren't using the proper exercises, then you're probably not going to reach your goals. And 10 out of 10, the movements that are going to give you the most bang for your buck are going to be compound movements. And the reason they're called compound movements is because they use multiple joints to complete that movement. Okay, so squats, bench, deadlift, these are going to be your main movements that give you the most strength, the most hypertrophy, the most stability, in my opinion. Now, there are trainers and coaches out there who believe that the cons to using compound movements or the risk of injury outweigh the pros, but in my personal opinion and in my anecdotal experience, I would have to disagree. So the way that I approach exercise selection is based on what do I really want to get good at. You know, I'm gonna use the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, but then after that, you know, what else are you gonna put in there? And it really depends on how you prefer to train. Do you prefer to have like upper body, lower body splits? Do you prefer to have full body splits? So with your exercise selection, you have a million different ways that you can go. But what I recommend is, where do you feel like your weak points are in your main compound lifts? Like for overhead press or bench press, if you're getting stuck here in that movement, then it's probably your triceps need to be a little stronger. So then I would recommend, you know, doing tricep press downs or overhead tricep extensions on those days, so you can kind of help to get that movement going. If you're not able to feel your glutes in your squat, then I would recommend, you know, doing some hip thrusts or maybe some banded movements that will help you really turn on. I don't want to say turn on but it'll help you feel and connect to your glutes more. So that one, I mean, it is pretty simple in the sense that, you know, compound movements are number one for me, but then it depends on, you know, as far as what other exercises I'm going to couple, it depends on how I want my programming. Lately, I've been really, really fond of doing upper lower splits because it allows me to push a little bit harder in my workouts, and I know that the next day I'm not going to have to work the same muscle groups. So right now, you know, I do squats and then Romanian deadlifts and then some split squats and some hip thrusts and call it a day, you know, but if you're wanting to do more full body, it's going to obviously look a lot different. Then it's going to be more like squats and then maybe some incline bench press and some single arm dumbbell rows and maybe some curls, you know. So the exercise selection, it really boils down to where are your weaknesses in your compound lifts and how do you prefer to train? Do you prefer to have full body? Do you prefer to have push-pull legs? Do you prefer to have upper, lower? Like, what is your preference as far as that goes? And then the last acute variable for today is duration. So for this one, it actually has two different definitions, okay? Duration, we're either talking about the length of time that it takes to complete a workout or the length of time spent in any phase of training. So the length of time, these are both kind of important, but really I think the length of time that you spend in a phase is more important than how long your workouts take. Now, if your workouts are taking 3 hours, personal opinion here, just to throw it out there, disclaimer, it's my personal opinion, it's too long. You don't need to work out that long. But if let's say you're in a muscular endurance phase, right? And so the goal is to increase your cardio ability. So if you do your first squat day on your first week and it takes you 30 minutes and then you increase the amount of sets that you're doing and yet it still only takes you 35 minutes, I'd say your cardio ability's probably gone up. Or if you do the same exercise twice and you do it in less time, that's kind of cool to know. That definitely is a way to measure progress. I always write down the moment that I start my working sets to the moment that I end my workout, just so I know how long my workouts are taking, not including my warm-ups. And then the second one, so how long you're spending in a phase of training. This is super important. If you're losing progress or you're unable to increase your sets or your reps or your weight, and you're just like, what is going on? And then you look back in your log and you've been doing this phase for 8 weeks, like, man, you've adapted. It's probably time to move on. And you can move on in one of two different ways. You can move on by changing your phase of training. So if you're in hypertrophy, you can move to muscular endurance or strength, or you can choose new exercises. And you can do hypertrophy training, but instead of doing hip thrusts, now you're doing glute kickbacks. Probably a terrible example, but that's fine. So that is it. That's the Acute Variables Definition Series, all in 3 parts. I just want to say thank you for all of those who have been watching and liking and sharing and subscribing and all of the good things. Our new website just went live last week, so be sure to go check out gistfitness.com. We also have a Facebook page, an Instagram page. You can find me personally on Instagram at Chelsea Barbell Fitness. I really appreciate all of your support so far, guys. It's only the beginning, and I can't wait to see where we go. Thank you so much, and we will be back next week. Super excited to announce next week I'll be starting a barbell series. So if you've been wanting to know just what the fuss is all about with these barbell compound movements, well, have no fear. I'm coming for you. Y'all have a wonderful week, guys, and as always, get your shit together.